You sit by a warm fire, walk through a silent forest, or listen to the wind roll off the coast. To us, these are just the background details of nature, but in the ancient world, these everyday sensory experiences were viewed differently. They were the remnants of something much larger. Mythological antiquity was a landscape of breath and frost. It was a world where the gods viewed magic as a finite resource, a treasure to be guarded rather than a gift to be shared. The Olympian gods locked the eternal flame away, high above the reach of any mortal hand. They believed that by hoarding the light, they could keep humanity weak, shivering, and perpetually looking toward the summit for survival. If those deities successfully kept every spark of wonder behind a wall of clouds, the world we inhabit today shouldn't exist. We should still be shivering in the dark, waiting for a permission that never comes. The transition to the world we know required 3 forgotten mortals to step into the divine vacuum. They didn't just challenge the gods, they paid the ultimate price to take that hoarded magic and scatter it across the earth. Arion was born in the flickering forge of Mycenae, the son of a mortal blacksmith and a god of fire. He grew up in a village that called him cursed, a boy whose eyes glowed like coals in a slowly freezing world. To reach the fire, Arion first had to descend. He entered the underworld without a sword, but with a collar he had forged himself. He approached Cerberus with the steady patience of a craftsman, treating the hound as a force to be understood, not a monster to be slain. This same restraint allowed him to do what no hero had managed. He touched the eternal flame. Instead of carrying it in a lantern, Arion absorbed the heat into his own body. He let the fire rewrite his physical form, turning his bones into a living hearth. Arion walked back down the mountain and into the world. He traveled from home to home, touching unlit chimneys and watching them roar back to life. He was literally burning himself out, his skin cracking like cooled obsidian as he gave his life force away to warm the abandoned villages of man. The warmth of a fireplace isn't a simple fact of physics. It is the lingering physical sacrifice of a boy who traded his own flesh to ensure a freezing world could finally glow again. While Arion brought the heat, a Spartan woman named Leonthe brought the stillness. Her entire life had been defined by the Spartan code, a high-volume existence of clashing shields and war cries, pursuit of honor through violence. In a hidden grove, she discovered a swan that was actually the god Apollo, cursed by Zeus to live in silence. Away from the noise of the city, Leonthe found a connection that didn't require a name or a rank, trading the chaos of war for a forbidden, quiet devotion. The peace was shattered by a prophecy that forced Leonthe to speak the god's true name. That single utterance enacted the final phase of Zeus's curse, turning Apollo's fluid, living form into cold, unmoving marble. In that moment, their love became legend, and the god became stone. Leonthe didn't return to her life as a warrior. She stripped off her armor, let her name drift away, and spent her remaining decades sitting in total silence beside the statue. She traded her identity to become the guardian of a memory that could no longer speak back. The heavy, reverent stillness we feel when walking through ancient ruins is the weight of that choice. It is the enduring echo of a soldier who gave up the noise of battle for a lifetime of silent mourning. Finally, there is the origin of the world's music. Melananion was a mortal bard chosen by the 9 muses to act as their vessel. His voice could calm storms and mend broken hearts, but he was merely meant to be the medium for their divine art. Melananion eventually left the world behind to climb Mount Helicon, seeking a melody that existed beyond language. He found the final song, a sound that could bend time and touch the fates themselves, but he made a fatal mistake. He decided he was the song's owner, not its messenger. He hoarded the melody, resulting in a curse where he heard it perfectly in his dreams, but forgot every note upon waking. He spent his life chasing a ghost that lived only inside his own head, driven mad by the weight of what he refused to share. In his final moments, Melananion reached a cliffside and finally stopped trying to possess the sound. He closed his eyes and died in peace. And as he did, the song he had held behind his teeth for years finally spilled out into the ocean spray and the coastal wind. Millennian's music became the ambient noise of the landscape. It is the reason the sea and the trees sound like a melody. The song he tried to hoard simply returned to the atmosphere where it belonged. The terrifying, tyrannical deities of antiquity seem to have vanished from the modern world. The gods who once demanded total subservience in exchange for every spark of warmth or note of music no longer hold the same grip on our reality. The divine monopoly was dismantled by mortals who realized magic only functions when shared. The stories of Arion, Leonthe, and Melanean show a pattern. Fire, love, and music withered in a closed fist. They survived by moving from one hand to the many. The consequences were absolute. When the gods hoarded, humanity froze. When the mortals tried to keep the gifts for themselves, love turned to stone, and artists lost their minds. Today, we live in the wreckage of that broken hoard. Every warm hearth, every silent grove, and every coastal breeze is the physical remain of a mortal who chose to break a god's lock and let the world glow. Modern concepts of a just, moral divinity fail when applied to ancient Greece. Behind the white marble of the statues lay a much darker reality, a pantheon defined by drama, emotional instability, and absolute power. Zeus sat at the center of this world. As ruler of the sky, king of Olympus, he wielded enough power to enforce cosmic order, but lacked the internal boundaries to govern himself. He operated without a moral code, famously transforming into animals like swans, bulls, or eagles to manipulate mortals. Imagine a Supreme Court justice turning into a goose to flirt with civilians. That was Zeus, but with lightning bolts. Olympus was a toxic hierarchy where those at the top satisfied every impulse without facing a consequence. The gods formed a rigid pyramid, with Zeus at the apex, elite gods below, and mortals at the base. Volatile elites like Ares brought raw chaos to meetings, while Aphrodite's vanity burned an entire civilization for a golden apple. Then there was Poseidon, who governed the seas. If a city failed to offer a sacrifice or chose another god, he would strike the ground with his trident, causing a devastating earthquake. Living in a universe governed by these personalities was a constant gamble. Without accountability, the whims of the elite gods made life for those at the bottom of the pyramid unpredictable and lethal. Beneath the elite drama sat a working class of deities. These were the figures who kept the system functioning while the ruling class fought. Hades managed the logistics of eternity. Stuck in the dark with the endless customer service of the dead, he was a brooding workaholic who quietly kept the souls of the world in order. Hephaestus was the divine blacksmith. Despite being physically disabled and disrespected by his family, he forged the thunderbolts, the tridents, and the very palaces that the other gods used to exert their power. Hestia, the eldest, chose to give up her throne entirely. She focused on the hearth and the home, tending the fire and maintaining domestic peace while her siblings chased glory. Even these divine figures had to embrace quiet servitude to survive the instability at the top. For mortals, the situation was even more dire. Consider Psyche, a mortal woman whose only crime was her natural beauty. Crowds began to worship her instead of the gods, a development that Aphrodite took as a personal insult. To the goddess of love, Psyche's existence was a threat to her ego. She didn't seek to guide the girl, she sought to break her. Aphrodite forced Psyche through a series of deadly trials. She sorted mountains of seeds, gathered wool from savage golden rams, and ventured into the underworld to fetch a box of deadless sleep. Psyche's story shows that the Olympians viewed mortal life as collateral damage. The moment a human threatened a god's vanity, the system moved to crush them. The case of Medusa reveals a deeper level of systemic abuse. She began as a devoted priestess, living a quiet life of service inside the temple of Athena. Poseidon violated her inside that sacred sanctuary. He invaded a temple he did not own to take a woman sworn to another god. Athena's reaction was not to punish Poseidon, but to blame Medusa for the desecration. The goddess of wisdom chose to protect the status of her fellow elite god while punishing her mortal servant. Medusa's golden hair was transformed into serpents, and her gaze was cursed to turn any living thing into stone. She was forced into a permanent, petrifying exile. This is how the hierarchy maintained itself. When the powerful committed crimes, the system transformed the victim into a monster to hide the truth. Psyche and Medusa were both broken by the gods, but their stories ended in two very different ways. Psyche survived through unrelentless labor and willpower by completing her trials. She eventually forced Zeus to grant her immortality and a place among the gods. Medusa, however, was murdered in her sleep. Perseus killed her to fulfill Achena's challenge, decapitating her while she was defenseless to secure his own glory as a hero. Athena then took Medusa's severed head and fixed it to her shield. The goddess weaponized the trauma of her former servant, using Medusa's frozen face to turn armies into stone. These mortals were either absorbed or destroyed by the hierarchy, but in the process they forced the gods to carry the evidence of their own cruelty for eternity. Today, the temples built for these deities are in ruins. The empires that feared Zeus and Poseidon are gone, and our relationship with these figures has flipped. We no longer offer sacrifices to appease the anger of the Olympic elite. Their power as rulers ended when the culture disappeared. Modern audiences relate to the mortals instead. We named the study of the human soul after Psyche, honoring the woman who survived the gods through her own grit. And we see Medusa on coins and in art as a survivor who was wronged by a god, rather than a monster who deserved to be killed. The elite gods ruled the ancient myths, but we have stopped telling the story from their perspective. The temples are empty, and the only part of the hierarchy that still feels alive is the history of the people who survived it.